Today we're going to be talking about retirement. Retirement, we've kind of been talking about this throughout the course. When you're saving for retirement, you want to do that, number one, because there is a point in your life where hopefully you can, have this idyllic lifestyle and actually retire. A lot of people may not choose to do that. You may want to continue working, and it all depends. What you don't want to do is you don't want to be forced to have to work in a job that you don't like. So if you are working in retirement, hopefully you're not the greeter at Walmart. You've done something throughout the course of your life where you've prepared and done pretty well, or well enough to where you can have some options. Social Security, again, in the paper that you're going to write, it's very useful for you to go into the Social Security website, and again, you can type in some numbers that would equate to the end of your working career. Because Social Security is a system by which you get a little bit more money. The whole system, you don't get a great deal of money throughout Social Security. It's not a great investment, believe me. But anyway, the amount of money you do get is going to be based upon the amount of time you spent working and contributing to the system. And so anyway, you can go on their website and you can look and see just exactly how much money that would be, and kind of judge for yourself whether that's kind of the lifestyle you want to be on. And then also keep in mind that this system is always under threat. They trot this out. We've been in a very intense kind of political climate lately, and they're saying, oh, they're trying to defund Social Security. Nobody's going to defund Social Security. People who are, in the Social Security program, especially taking the benefits of it, they vote. And if that were truly under threat from being defunded, that just wouldn't happen. That'd be political suicide. What does happen, and is much sneakier, more insidious, and probably more damaging, is they'll go in and raid the money that's been set aside for Social Security, because Social Security's typically pretty well funded, but it's just overspent. One thing, for example, sometimes you'll see some kind of Yahoo lawyers, Binder and Bender were these guys' names. I'm probably going to get sued. It's not a good idea to criticize lawyers. But anyway, these guys, their gig was they'd be on TV advertising about Social Security disability, and they really weren't making their money from the people who they were trying to get on Social Security disability. What they were doing was getting people who were on state disability or local disability and transferring them and getting them on the federal program. And in doing so, the going rate used to be $1,500 paid by the state to these guys for every person they could take from their state disability and put them on the federal disability. And so the local governments, the state governments, saw it as a big savings, but it really does put a burden on Social Security. Most people think of Social Security for the elderly, for people who have worked, but it can also be used for younger folks who have a disability. I'm not saying those people shouldn't be taken care of, but to fund them out of Social Security was just one more drain on Social Security. And then there's also the baby boomer problem, where you have more people in retirement, more people working, and so the whole Ponzi scheme, whether it be in crypto this week or whether it be in Social Security Ponzi done by the government. The difference is that the crypto guys, somebody probably will go to jail, but the government Ponzi scheme, they'll do this stuff forever and continue on. One last thing, too, not to get political, but I did kind of tell you that whole student loan thing was the forgiveness thing, that was an election thing. The president doesn't have the authority to do that. The funding like that has to come through the House. And obviously, when the president says that's just a false promise. And if they really wanted to do it, his same party could go ahead and approve that through the House, and it would be legal. The legal challenges to that, and what's going to prevent it from happening, is the fact that the president doesn't have the authority to wade into financial matters. The saying, or the the fact is that the House controls the purse strings to the budget, not the president. So the president can do certain things. And anyway, that's not my opinion. That's what the court has said once again, and what Nancy Pelosi said a couple years ago too. So anyway, enough of that. So it's going to be a pretty dismal retirement if you're just living on Social Security. I had some people who, well, people I have working for me generally I prefer to keep them as independent contractors, but when they came to me and started working, they had about $50 a week extra that wasn't allocated to the rest of their living expenses. Social Security just didn't make it. They wouldn't even be able to have a vehicle with just living on Social Security. Qualifying, so 40 credits. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of your credits are earned by your working times. So it's 4 credits per year. So obviously, 1 credit, so that's 10 years to get a little bit, and also available for the disabled, which is a good thing, but I don't think it should be funded under Social Security because that doesn't make any sense in terms of a retirement system paying people who happen to be disabled. They should be paid through a different fund so that the numbers work out. This was put on there back when we did have a tremendous number of people in the workforce and a smaller number of people retired. So, little problems. Other benefits, spouses, spouse over 60, child, so there's also some child benefits that can happen. And it's a pretty broad system, but it's a federal system, and it's a behemoth, and very political in terms of the way they talk about the funding, because nobody wants to be against funding Social Security, but nobody kind of keeps track of what's being spent by Social Security. So you can start taking it at 62. If you delay, you can get a little bit more money. This is kind of interesting as well, because sometimes, especially as, unfortunately, due to COVID and drugs or whatever, there's multiple causes, but the life expectancy is actually going down. And in Russia, which is, was in a different place financially, this was a couple years back, they were setting up a retirement scheme where they kept pushing that retirement date out. Well, folks in Russia, for a variety of factors, don't live as long as they live quite short lives. And the eligible date for retirement was beyond the life expectancy, certainly the life expectancy of males, which is somewhere around 58. It's not good. Tough life. So anyway, when they push this date out, there's a chance that a number of people in the population won't even make it that long if they've, live a fairly hard life or are unlucky. Retirees living longer, that's kind of a statement that's not necessarily. If you're, have a fairly clean life and are fairly lucky and don't do stupid things, maybe you can stretch this out, but sometimes that doesn't happen. But actual life expectancy itself is decreasing a bit. Many people are relying less. That's exactly what I'm getting at. That it's helpful, again, and that's the point of this term paper, is to look at the situation now where you have a chance to do things. If you just go through life thinking, oh, I'm good, I'm going to have Social Security at the end, and then you actually get to be 62 or 60 whatever, and you go, oh man, I screwed up, I should not have counted on this solely, that'd be a problem. So you go to their website and you can take a look. Let me check this one out real quick as long as we're here. Whoops, I put this link in here directly, so again, you could run this calculation and you can enter in the numbers in your time. So 1960, so that's be somebody who's coming up on what, 62. Earnings that current year, 60. So let's just go with these generic numbers they have in here. Future retirement date, today's dollars. We may have enough information to run this. So boom. I mean, it's that easy. So if you can make it on $2,000 a month, I mean, if you're still renting a house, if you don't own that thing, oof. Or if you live in, the MOA, especially municipality of Anchorage, your property taxes are probably going to be, well, that maybe I've exaggerated a bit, but your property taxes are going to be pretty high. You subtract a little insurance, maybe a little increased health care. You probably want to eat, warm your house. You're not going to have a lot left. So, anyway, check it out and make your own decision on that. So, employee sponsored. So, back in the day, there used to be sort of this, whatever, traditional work program. You go to work for GM, you're building cars, and you just start in with a company, and then 20, 30 years later, you get the retirement plan. And it's not necessarily the case anymore. What's happened is most employers have found in order to cut costs that they go after some of the benefits. And the workers play a role in this as well. If you go have an offer from a company, just starting out, and one company's going to pay you $80,000 with full benefits, and the other company's going to pay you, $100,000 with no benefits. A lot of people are going to jump on that $100,000 with no benefits, and so in order to make themselves competitive, because it's going to cost the company about the same. If you're giving full benefits, it's going to be at least $20,000 per employee to take care of that. So, companies are smart, and they've made themselves more attractive by offering a higher salary with fewer benefits. Most companies now, when you go to work for them, it's not a one-size-fits-all type plan. It's not necessarily no benefits. It's what they call a cafeteria plan, where the theory is there's different items on the menu, and you grab what you want, and you make your own plan, which puts you in a fairly challenging situation. If you just started with a company, you're going to walk in, the first week, you're going to have some meeting with HR, probably in a group environment, and they're going to, everything's going to be exciting and welcome to the company, and they hand you all this literature, and they give you a quick briefing on your health insurance options, your investment options, all these different benefits that come with the company. And you may ask some questions, but you're the brand new employee. You don't want to be negative. You don't want to, appear to be money grubbing, and so you may be a little bit more reserved. But yet again, you're making decisions that are going to affect the rest of your career if you stay there. And so, if you go in there completely blind and asking questions like, well, what's a 401k? What do you mean tax deferred? What about, health savings account? You're going to have a steep learning curve, because you just started with a company as well. So you're probably learning your job, and now you're trying to make all these decisions that they give you a couple weeks, maybe a month. You make these decisions, and then these decisions are final for the rest of your career, or at least till the next open seasons. Most companies have what they call an open season, generally in the fall, where you can make some switches, some changes to your plan. You can opt for dental insurance if you didn't do it. You can, change your medical insurance, and that's necessary a lot of times, especially if you happen to get married and your spouse has got a better medical plan, so you drop your one company's medical plan. Anyway, there's lots of things that can change, but some of those financial things can be a little bit stickier and a little bit more permanent and harder to undo if you make a bad choice. So anyway, you'll look at it. So most plans are set up now where it's a contribution type thing, and it's in a 401k or 403b or TSP or what have you. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. defined benefit plan. So this is kind of the old school one. Um, Now, there's a concept here called vesting, and you'll find that with most companies. And so, let's say you work for a company and they've got a match. You put down 6% towards your retirement, and they'll match that with 4%. So you're actually putting away 10% of your salary into some sort of retirement plan like a 401k. So, first off, you need to do this. You need to, if the company's offering you a match, you need to do whatever's kind of necessary to make sure you get that match, or else you're leaving money on the table. You're working for less than your counterparts. Let's get back to this just for round numbers. You're making 100 grand, and the company has a match of say 4%. You put down 6%, so you put down 6,000. They put down 4,000. And that's how you start saving for your retirement. If you opt not to put down that 6,000, if you turn down that match, well, you're working for exactly 100,000. If you take that match, you're really working for 104,000. So you're a little bit better compensated. So there's, you need to kind of explore the programs. A company I worked for, one of the reasons I don't work for them is because they were a bit dishonest. They used to just give us 10% with no match required, just 10% on the salary. They gave it to us in retirement. Then they came back to us. They said, no, we've got a much better deal for you now. We're going to do this match system where you put down 6% and we give you 4%. You still get your 10%, but this is much better for you because it makes the company stronger. And somehow it's supposed to benefit from that. Whatever. It was just, I lost a bit of respect for the company. So here's an employee sponsor one, a defined contribution. So this one was a defined benefit, the keyword benefit, and here's contribution. And this one makes you and your employee contribute to the retirement accounts, allows you to invest the funds you wish within a certain limits. They usually, because of the match and those things, they usually put constraints. You probably cannot use this money to trade crypto if you want. There's going to be certain mutual funds, and you can choose within those. And getting back to the concept of vesting that I didn't really explain much, vesting means that if they're providing you this match and you only work for the company for 6 months, they're kind of getting screwed. They did all this onboarding stuff, they did all this training. You weren't super productive for those first few months, and now you're quitting and you're taking your match money with you. Yeah, not so fast. That doesn't happen. They usually have a program of vesting, which, again, with one of the companies I work for, the vesting for new employees was 3 years. So they would put all this money in your account, your vesting amount, their amount of the match. But unless you worked for the company for at least 3 years, that money really wasn't yours. If you quit before then, that money went back to them. At the 3-year point, 50% of it became yours. If you quit after 3 years, you took half of it with you. And if you worked for the company for 5 years, which is kind of a big deal, in a lot of sectors now, you got to keep it all. So again, it's kind of a carrot and a stick thing where they use a bit of control over you to do that. So we've talked all about this. Just saving. Some people wait too long. Start saving at an early age is much better. Contribute. Pay yourself first. Kind of stuff we've talked about from day one. It is like extra income. True statement. Encourages employees to save and offers tax-deferred income. So this whole business of tax-deferred, I think I've talked about it once or twice, but we'll cover it one more time right here. Let's say you're working for a company and you're making that 100 grand again. The tax laws. You're not going to have a huge tax liability, but you're going to have some. You're going to be paying some, especially at that highest tax bracket portion of your income. If you're only making 80 grand, you'd be paying less in taxes. Well, what does this notion of tax deferred, so this would be things like 401ks, 403bs, their savings plans, IRAs, individual retirement accounts, not a Roth IRA, but a traditional IRA. Um, what you do in this program, and let's look at a 401k. Let's say you're making your 100 grand, but instead of taking all of this money every month, um, you set aside 20% of your income, and so 20 grand for retirement savings. So if you do that, you put that into a designated account like a 401k. Now when you file your taxes at the end of the year, although you're making 100,000, you only pay taxes on 80,000 because 20,000 of it went in a tax deferred account. It's not free of taxes. Taxes will have to be paid on it when it's withdrawn. But the theoretical whatever, the understanding is that you're going to retire this when you're in retirement, when you don't have another job, and so your tax um, load is quite low. You can still have a lot of assets, but they're taxing you on your income, income taxes. And so if you're living off your retirement, there's not much in the way of income there, and so when you withdraw that money, you'll be paying the taxes at a lower rate. And that's how the concept works. So that's tax deferment. You're not avoiding it, you're just deferring it till retirement time. Yep, you usually have a number of funds. But they still exercise some control, and you can't necessarily, because this was done through your employer, it's an employer-sponsored fund. I got in a bit of a sticking thing with UA. In fact, when I was teaching full-time, I tried to pull some money out for a real estate deal. I was just recharacterizing it. I was taking it out of their fund, and I was going to put it in it was actually an IRA property, but it was the same sort of status, and they didn't want me to move the money. In fact, they said I couldn't move the money. I said, fine, I'll quit. And whatever, it got kind of ugly. And I actually kind of had to submit a letter saying, yep, I'm done. And they said, well, okay, we'll figure this out. Because at that time, I had actually switched to where I was teaching on not a term status, but just as an adjunct. Universities much prefer people as adjuncts because they don't have to pay them squat. So. Typical comps. So this is, again, this theoretical model. And this is like these life cycle funds that you see where there's a target date out there in the future. That a fund of that nature that's set up for retirement when you're, I guess, mid-70s here. That fund would typically be comprised of pretty high-risk stuff when you're young. Here's your age, because you can afford to take that risk because you have time for it to rebuild. And then as you progress in life, they want you in lower risk stuff as you go. Yeah, I've never really followed this model, but given the current state of the stock market, maybe I should have. Oh well. So retirement contribution 401k, so 2020. So when I said we're now in what, 2022, so it's about 20 grand. And then also if you're older, you can do these catch-up contributions. If you're 50, you can put in more money. But again, doubling up to catch up, putting in more money when you're older isn't always the best strategy because the time value of money, it's not going to have as much time to accumulate. Matching contributions by employers, we've discussed. So this is what happens. If you need that money, you pull out by 59, before 59 and a half, yeah, you're going to pay a 10% penalty. And then also all that money, let's say you're making 100 grand, you pull out 20 grand for whatever purpose. Now you're going to be going into that tax, you're making 120,000, so you're going to be paying a little bit more in taxes. Talked about the match. Okay, so we'll talk really quickly about a Roth. I've done Roths as well. Roths are a great deal. Roth is just, these numbers and all these things. These just refer back to sections of the code, or Roth was actually a congressman who wanted something with his name on it. What they do in a Roth is it's a 401k or an IRA, but it's not the traditional IRA. If somebody just says an IRA, they're talking about a traditional IRA. And a lot of times, rather than say a Roth IRA, they'll just say a Roth. And a Roth type investment, what you do is you pay the taxes. So let's say you're making $100,000 and you contribute, whatever, $5,000 to a Roth IRA. When you go to pay your taxes at the end of the year, you pay your taxes on $100,000. A Roth IRA is not. There's no tax deferment. No, that doesn't apply here. You're paying your taxes on the money, and then you're putting it into the fund. So there's no real immediate benefit. But the deal with a Roth IRA is it still has these characteristics where it's put into a retirement account. And you can't, take it out before you're 59 and a half and the rest of that. But if you do that, you can, when you do pull that money out at the end, you're not subject to taxes because the taxes have already been paid on it once. And so it's kind of a neat thing. Again, I bought a piece of property up by Chicaloon. It was like 65 acres or something, and it appreciated quite a bit. But I'll never have to pay the taxes on what it appreciated. The amount of money I spent on it. When that property is sold, there will be no tax bill on it, regardless of what it's worth at the end. So it's kind of neat. Anyway, I'm a big fan of Roth IRAs, but there's typically limits on how much money you can put in a Roth IRA. So you usually have a combination of these accounts. 403B for people who work for nonprofits. So this would include universities and hospitals and things like that. Although I don't know about all hospitals being nonprofits, so it probably depends what sector of a hospital, how that hospital's set up, depending on what that would be. They have these tax-deferred programs for pretty much everybody in terms of their work model. For people who might be in smaller firms, they have them for different names, different programs. People who might be self-employed. So anyway, you generally, as an employee, have access to some sort of tax-deferred plan. Profit sharing, another means of getting some money for retirement, where in this case the employer is contributing to it through a profit sharing program. Again, another nice to have. One of the drawbacks from this and this employee stock ownership plan, so another benefit that can be offered by some employers, is let's say you're associated with a company, right? So if that company goes out of business, you lose your job. And if you've got a bunch of stock in that company, that can also be a problem. One of the companies I work for, a big defense contractor, they had an employee stock program where they would sell employees stock at a discount. They'd give you a 5% discount. And I took them up on it. I'd buy the max available of stock, but I was kind of nasty about it because I'd sell it the next day, just on the secondary market, because I wasn't a huge fan of the company I was working for, number one, which was kind of a problem. It was kind of a soul-crushing company to start out with. But anyway, I would make 5%. So it was simple math to me. There wasn't a whole lot of, the stock's going to go up or down. Not in a day, it's not. I'd just sell the next day, and I did that for 5 years or so. I didn't make a whole bunch of money, but it was, I think I calculated out, it was another $700 a month, or not a month, a year, just based upon the limits they put on it. But because they would only allow you to buy so much but I bought the Max Extend at a discount. I had a 5% discount and made 5% on it overnight. Fair enough. So, sorry about clicking the slides here. I'm trying to get this thing offered. Um, After you leave your employer and you've got these retirement settings, or say you're switching companies, um, you do have the option of keeping it there. Not a whole lot of advantages, probably. I would rather, um, well, if you have a new employer, you're probably best to switch it over. If you're retiring or something, you could just move it to a different company or recharacterize it and put in your own name. But anytime you're moving funds that are characterized as in an IRA status or a 401k status, you have to be very careful, because remember we talked about if you withdraw money from these programs, you're subject to penalties. So you don't want to withdraw, you want to roll over. You want to keep it in that same status. And once it goes, it's irreversible. If you go to your employer and say, I want to cash out my 401k, and what you really mean is I want to roll it over. But if they write you a check with your name on it and just your name, you're screwed. You just generated an IRS problem for yourself, and you're going to have to pay a penalty. So don't do that. I've done this a number of times where I've rolled it over, and the check will be for whatever, your name, for the benefit of, and probably have another brokerage account listed there, so it stays in that rollover status. So that's how you switch them around. Keogh, just another type of plan that for self-employed people probably doesn't apply to a whole bunch, but like I say, if there's a program out there that applies to some of these bigger companies, there's probably a variant that applies to smaller companies as well. And a SEP, another thing for smaller companies. IRA, so I've touched on this already. Traditional IRA, or what most people just call an IRA. You probably already have one of these. The one neat thing about this, about an IRA, is it is something that can be done after the tax year. It can be done after, January 1st, where just prior to you filing your taxes in April, typically, you can go back and contribute to an IRA, and it will change your tax status. Contributions may be or may not be tax deductible. Depends on your income level. Most people would not do it if it's not tax deductible. They would just do the eligible portion and then forego the other part. Interest earned is tax deferred, which I talked about, just like a 401k, and it's got that penalty. Let me look at something real quick. I've got in my mind the hardship withdrawals from 401ks, but I want to make sure I don't miss one of the items, so we'll just consult the book of knowledge. So again, you don't want to just get this off any site, but from the IRS, it's probably going to be a little difficult to wade through here, just because it's an IRS site, but they've tried to get it better. Hardship withdrawals and loans. Let me do a little research on this for just a second. All right, so one of the things I wanted to see in terms of these hardships was what they actually qualify, and it's pretty liberal. I mean, this isn't bad. So heavy financial, immediate and heavy financial need, where you can typically withdraw this money without penalty. So, reasons you couldn't get the money, but anyway, here are some of these. They call it safe harbor IRS regulations, but medical care and expenses for the employer, so that's kind of nice. Costs related to the purchase of your home, your principal residence, tuition for up to 12 months, payments, and funeral expenses, and then also certain expenses if your house, say, got damaged by an earthquake or whatever, some extreme roof gets ripped off. So there are ways to get at that money, which I've been saying is a good reason to save for retirement. You may need it for something else, and you can get access to it. You're still going to pay the taxes on it when you pull that money out, but you're not going to pay that 10% penalty, which is nice. And once you pull it out, yeah, you can't put it back in there. They're pretty clear about that. But anyway, I just wanted to go through that so I wasn't kind of just talking out in my shrinkter. Roth IRA, we already talked about that. Catch-up payments, if you're above 50, probably most of you aren't there. Rules may change by then anyway. But yeah, I would really encourage you to do the Roth thing, though, because the 401k part, the tax-deferred thing is great, but it is based upon, the understanding that taxes are going to go down in the future, based upon your income being lower. But if tax rates happen to go up and things happen to change, it could be a problem. Also, 401ks are, the government's got a different outlook on this money as opposed to you. I mean, sometimes the government feels that they're not getting the money they deserve. It kind of gets back to whose money is it, but there may be a point. I don't know that they'd ever be able to get rid of 401ks, but there are some politicians who would like to, and so that's always a threat that programs might change. Here they're comparing the Roth and the traditional, which I think you understand. I hope if you pay attention, we'll just go through it one more time. So traditional contributions are sheltered until withdrawn, and a Roth, this is after-tax money is how it's characterized. You've already paid taxes on it once, and so you put it in that account. And when you take it out, regardless, I mean, and seriously, some mutual funds and other things, the value could just explode. That's how I ended up with that property in Chickaloon. I'd bought some stock, and it, I don't always do great, but this one was up 527% in a year. I mean, it just exploded, and that wasn't going to last. I mean, I wasn't, whatever. I'd done enough, and I wanted to kind of stabilize that whole situation, so I bought some property, and I put it under the Roth IRA, and it's done well, but yeah. So a lot of people, whether you make money in crypto or whatever you do, sometimes you gotta step back and go, that was a good thing, and there's a fine art to knowing when to step off the ride and try and stabilize that money, and real estate is usually a good place for that. Not the most exciting investment, real estate, especially in Alaska. It doesn't fluctuate that much. I mean, when they talk about the real estate market collapsing, they're talking about 5%. Hell, that crypto dude, he lost billions in a day, although he wasn't really investing. There was some scammage going on there. Factors that affect your choice. So marginal tax rate at the time of contribution and when you withdraw your money. So if you're not making a whole bunch of money contributing to a Roth IRA or contributing to a Roth IRA might be the better strategy because you're not going to be paying much in taxes. So if you're making quite a bit of money, then the 401k is probably more advantageous, right? Because your tax bite at that higher end is going to be considerably higher. And then this concept of when you withdraw your money, I think a lot of people, just for quality of life and other things, may not necessarily ever retire, and it's a nice thing to work when you're retirement age because you like it and not because you need to. I mean, a lot of people have something they enjoy doing. It gives their life purpose, and it probably makes them live a little bit longer by staying active and the rest of it. So if you're somebody who's going to continue to work throughout the course of your life, the 401k is less attractive, but who knows what's going to happen that far out in the future. Annuities, they just kind of throw these in here. Annuity is a broad concept. Annuity, really, I mean, you get it definitionally. The reason that, this comes from annual, it means a series of equal payments over a term. And you can kind of think about it where it's like a reverse insurance policy, or the opposite of an insurance policy. An insurance policy, you pay into it, but the only way to collect on it, life insurance, is when you die, right? Well, an annuity is the opposite in the fact that you say in just a simplified case, you give them like 10 grand, and the you're the annuitant. But anyway, the person who holds the annuity starts making $100 payments to you, and those payments continue for the rest of your life. And if it's next week, not a great investment. But if you live for a long, long time, that money starts to, accrue. And so the longer you live, the more money you actually make. Some people will set up annuities as part of their retirement. And so when they have a fair amount of money in their working years, they'll contribute some money, and these payments will start. And you can actually do it where it's deferred, where you get no money for the first 10 years, and then you get a bigger chunk of money when that actually does start paying out, because you've got nothing there for those first 10 years. And anyway, those payments continue through the course of your life. The problem with annuities that I don't have an annuity, and most people don't have annuities, is because they're kind of complex, and you can't just buy them online typically. You need to go through an agent, a salesman, a commission type person. And so again, here we're getting into investments that you're buying from somebody on commission and whatever. I have a brother-in-law, in fact his son's in the business now too. They do medical insurance, health insurance for companies, and these guys make bank day after day, because once you get signed up in this program, once you're one of their customers, and people have health insurance for years and years, they continue to earn those commissions. So commissions can really eat into your savings program, your retirement program. But anyway, if you hear the term annuity, it can mean a lot of things. It's just a general term. You have to look at the specifics of the program you're involved in. But the concept is a series of annual payments, and generally you give them a big chunk of money, and then they start making payments to you, and you have to do some sort of evaluation to make sure, because I just pulled some numbers off the top of my head. Is $100 a month for giving them $10,000, is that a good idea? In today's climate, especially with insurance or interest rates, probably not a great idea. But anyway, got to see what makes sense for you. Variable annuity. This is one that amount would change based upon the performance of the underlying investments. And high fees, again, commissions are part of that, because it's got to be managed by somebody. And if you take the money back, you say, I want my 10 grand. Yeah, there's probably something you signed up for that says that there's going to be a pretty steep fee paid to that company. Commissions. So look for no load. And things can change over time. Again, life insurance in general used to be strictly had to get it through an agent. Now most of it's done online. So you might find some sort of annuity product that can be done without that high cost structure, because the basic investment's not a bad concept. It's just all the fees and the admin and the commissions that are associated with it just kind of kills it. So estimate your future retirement savings. So here they're trying to dramatize, time value of money and how you're going to end up with a huge nest egg. And compared to the charts that we started out on day one, I think the charts, the Excel spreadsheets, those do a much better job of showing what's available. But anyway, these numbers are valid, and however you like to look at it. But yes, 6%, it's compound, that's earning interest on interest, and it's a miraculous thing. In this case, 1,000, and just keeps going up, and amount saved per year, and then at retirement, how much it ends up with. So 40 years and 6%. Again, the stock market had been doing 10%, and I'm not just talking the past couple years. It'd been doing more than that, but this recent dip, I wouldn't make. We're in kind of abnormal times, I'm hoping, and when things get back to normal, they'll trundle on. I just talked to a friend this weekend, though. He's moving to the Caymans, so there you go. Some people think times are not returning. So again, another chart to show you that. Different interest rates. And keep in mind, these same vast differences based upon interest rates, you could apply this to mortgages. Right now, with 7% mortgage rates, the payments, if you're trying to buy a house, you would see a mortgage go from, say, $1,200 to, $2,500 for the same exact house. So even though home prices are a little cheaper right now, the effect of those interest rates on mortgages has killed the real estate market. We won't do too many problems like this. It's not realistic that you're going to withdraw it all in 1 year. But if you did, that would be the penalty. Estate planning. So estate planning, we talked about retirement while you're still alive. Estate planning is after you've departed. So again, you don't know when this is going to happen. So big deal is you want to make sure that you plan far enough ahead to where you don't hit some point in your retirement where, oh my God, I've lived longer than I thought, which is a great thing, but the bad news is I'm completely out of money. No, you probably aren't going to plan it quite that close. So there probably are going to be some funds left, or probably the home you were living in, all these other things. Those would all be part of your estate since you're gone. They're not your personal property anymore because you're not a person. You're an estate. And so deceased person after all the debts are paid. The way this works is when somebody passes away, they typically establish a trust account, and all of your assets go in there, and things are sold, or anyway, things are kind of resolved, bills are paid, and then whatever's left over is transferred to your heirs, to your beneficiaries, to however you set that up. Well, if you have no plan, what that's called is intestate. That means that plan would be typically a will. But this really, estate planning goes beyond just having a will. If you're smart, and especially if you have a business and a lot of assets, you've got a mechanism to start transferring those before you die. Because, for example, if you have a business, I have children as part of the shareholder, so the company, the LLC, doesn't actually go away. The LLC just kind of has an ownership transfer, meaning I died. Well, fair enough. And so it's less of an event from a tax status and from an ownership status. If you die without a will, without any of this planning, you created a huge mess. And there are state laws that apply. Each state is different. There's a whole court that's set up for this sort of thing. It's called probate. And if you go to a probate court, intestate means that you didn't have a will, so now these state rules are going to apply, and things are probably not going to end up the way you would have ideally wanted. And what you've kind of said to the court, too, is you really don't give a whatever about your estate, and why should they? I mean, the courts are overburdened, so you're not going to be their highest priority. So in terms of getting money distributed out to your children, your heirs, your spouse, yeah, that's not going to happen in a hurry. And when it does happen, there's going to be a huge expense from the lawyers and everybody else involved, because you left a big mess for somebody else to clean up, and you didn't care, and they don't care much either. So anyway, the way to take care of this is get your affairs in order and have a will. And when I say a will is not just like, oh, I scribbled it down on a piece of paper, or I have some holographic will. No, you needed to go to a lawyer or maybe a paralegal. Paralegal's kind of like a lawyer, but with lower fees and you know works with lawyers. Sometimes they can do some things on their own, perhaps a will. Other things it takes an actual certified a bar member kind of lawyer to get it done. But in any case, you need a proper will at some point in your life, and it doesn't have to be super specific. In fact, you can kind of do a lot more damage by making the will very specific. Like identifying particular pieces of property or, children by name, all that kind of stuff. Now, there are certain times you need to get a new will, and because it's a state document, yeah, whatever. If you move states, you'd have to get a new will. If you get remarried, unmarried, you might have to get that done as well. Depends on how the will is written. But when you get this done, it's witnessed, and then you get a copy of it, and that's the other thing. You're not going to be here, right? So you need to not only have a copy of the will, but your children or whoever need to know where a copy of that will is, and maybe it's held by the lawyer, but I've never done that. They always just hand it to me, and they're, because I have a military background, I can get this done up on the base through a base legal service, because it's not a big deal. It's not getting a will prepared is not a huge, time-consuming effort. In the days of word processing and stuff, you just fill out some sort of drop-down menu or some Word PDF template. They type it up. They make it look pretty. You walk into the office. They call over some random people who you don't know, but that doesn't matter because they can witness the will. All they're witnessing is that you signed it, and you walk out the door with a will, and everything's good. So, reasons for having a will. So, again, to make sure things get distributed the way you want, that the beneficiaries are listed, and, again, this intestate. If you happen to do that, you just created a big unnecessary mess, and you died without a will, so the court appoints it. Anyway, you're just in bureaucratic hell, and as are your children and everybody else. Nothing's going to happen fast. The fees are going to be high, and the state's probably going to end up with a fair amount of your money because you didn't care. What do you need to create a will? So, 1821, mentally competent. So, I'm not going to go there, but that's going to get undue influence. You can't do it under duress. Signed and dated. The witnesses who are not beneficiaries. Use of attorney is recommended. So anyway, it doesn't have to be a great attorney. It just has to be. Again, I would check into the paralegal options. A good attorney is a few $100 at least per hour, whereas a paralegal's probably 75 or something per hour. So, and the more of this that you got done ahead of time, the way this would normally happen is they'd give you some sort of worksheet to fill out, and they would have the thing prepared, and then you just show up, and they just witness the will, and you're good to go. And again, you don't put a bunch of garbage in there about I want my stereo to go to whoever. And I mean, I guess you could do that as some external document, but you would not want to clutter up your regular will with all that extraneous stuff. Simple will, traditional marital share. This kind of gets down more in specific. The main thing is that you have a will. We're not going to be tested on what type of will you have, how you choose to divide it up. The main thing is to have the will. Heirs by percentage. Percentages are nice because then it doesn't have to change. If you've got nothing, it's a percentage of zero is nothing, a percentage of a huge amount. Anyway, it can be the same will and it still works just fine. Executor. You typically don't need to appoint that beforehand. Somebody within your family, they could actually do it, but a lot of times because of the emotional situation, they'll appoint somebody, typically a lawyer, sets up the trust. They've done this stuff before. They take care of the whole thing. So they collect all the debts, they pay things out, and then boom, And not everything needs to be sold. I mean, if you have a car or something like that and a house, it can be transferred under the will. But if people just want cash, then the um, trust may sell the pieces of the property. Guardian. This gets beyond the will. Who's going to take care of your kids if you have children? But I've never had child stuff in the will. Signature, funeral arrangements, location, financial document. I've never done that either. Main part is the will, and I try not to put a bunch of stuff in there. In some of the medical things, and when to pull the plug, not to pull the. I no, I'm not. That's not going in that will. Changing your will, you can make amendments and stuff, but again, it's we're talking just printing out a few sheets of paper. Why not just print out a brand new will? So rather than do a codicil or something like that, I've never done that. It's always been just a new will. And if you make it general enough, it doesn't need to be changed, but maybe every 5-10 years, if that. You just look and make sure it's still valid, and then you go. But yeah, if you marry, move to a different state, could have an issue. So this can go very smoothly. The court is going to be very happy and very expeditious if you've got everything squared away. It will go through the court system, but the probate court system. But if there's a will, if there's lawyers, if everything's kind of set up, it just kind of glides right through and it's done. But if you're intestate, if there's no will, then it's a complete mess. So executor in probate court files a copy of the will, lists the assets, opens up a bank account, all the funds go in there, all the funds get distributed, and then the trust or that account goes away. So they've got a sample in here, but again, I don't have my children named in there. A lot of this is the more specificity you have. You could say my wife. Boom. You're only gonna have one at a time unless we're in some other state. Where I live, no, I don't do that. Anyway, this is more specific. I'm not saying my will's not much longer than this, but it doesn't have things in here that are going to change at that time. I don't have a name executor. So anyway, talk to, you can look online. You can, probably the best way to do it is find out who's going to prepare your will. Find out what they want in terms of document to prepare it. Maybe you set up an appointment, or maybe you just go in there with a worksheet. Somebody types it up, and then it gets witnesses and signed. This is not a do-it-yourself kind of thing, though. It somewhere in the process, the witnesses and somebody from the legal profession needs to be involved, or you've completely wasted your time. If you're doing this out by hand, it's not going to be recognized by the court, so you just wasted all your time. They're putting guardians and power of trustees. Depends on the state, what needs to go in there, and for the most part, what doesn't need to go in there is more important. Estate taxes, these things change all the time. Inheritance tax, death tax, depending on what side of the politics you're on. But this generally is for higher wealth individuals. The problem is with people that have like farms, things that don't generate a tremendous amount of income, but in terms of assets, actually do have a fair amount of value. And this is where people do lose their farms and things like that because they're this huge asset is transferred to their children or their spouse or whatever, and people can't afford that estate taxes on it. So the smart farmer, the smart person would have set it up in a corporation and not have it assigned to a specific person and not have that big transfer happen. But that's where the planning part comes in. So if you get to be in, a sort of a high wealth situation or with multiple businesses and things, you want to make sure that you've done your estate planning, as a plan throughout the course of your life and not as a cleanup item after you're dead. So, these are older numbers, but that's 11.4 million, Can the first 5.3 million. So for most of us, we're not going to be up in these levels, and so we're not going to have a huge estate tax. But again, if you had some sort of situation that put your property in a higher level, you could lose it all because people are not going to be able to come up with that 40% in cash to pay the taxes on that property transfer. Proper planning can reduce these taxes, and a lot of that has to do with the business structure. So, in Alaska, there's not going to be the state taxes, but federal taxes are certainly not going down, and these limits may be marching down because a lot of people, whatever. It's a huge chunk of money out there that again politicians see as a chance to get some money for the government. Yep, you got to know where you stand. But again, these are nice problems to have, having to worry about how to manage your estate. You've obviously done pretty well. So we talked the extreme where, the first part of this lecture we're talking about how to survive on just Social Security alone, how it's not going to be pleasant. Now people are basically trying to take it with them, and that's not going to work. But also how to pass it on to your heirs, where your heirs actually get a portion of it. And there is something to be said for, you being able to, it just gets back to a philosophical thing, whether you think you can do a better job with your money than what the government can do with it. So if you want your property to be turned into some sort of park or something like that, or kept intact or donated to charity, it's way better to make that decision early in your life. You could, in my situation with some fairly large chunks of land, if somebody said they wanted to make it a conservation easement or something like that, they could do that early in their life and identify it as such, and because it's now upon their death is going to be ending up in a charitable use, their property taxes would be greatly reduced. So during the course of their life, they could pay next to nothing in terms of property taxes because it's in some sort of irrevocable trust where that land is going to be given to a charitable use. I had a daughter going to school down in Georgia, and big, huge Catholic school with this weird house right in the center of the property. And the gentleman had given that property to the church, to the school, upon his death. And so he didn't have to pay any property taxes on it. So it was a win-win for him and the school. The problem was the school didn't really win because this guy continued to live. I mean, he did this when he was like in his 70s, and I think he went on to, make it beyond 100. He had girlfriends and all kinds of stuff. He was living the high life, not paying a dime in property taxes, and his life was unaffected by the fact that, he looked like a great magnanimous guy for donating all this property, but he didn't have to pay a lick of property tax that whole time, and he had choice real estate. So there are ways to change things, and because he had put his property in an irrevocable trust, his property taxes basically went away. So to help, and we're getting into that, trust, gifts, contributions. So grantor, the man in this case was the grantor. The trustee was the person who was managing that. You can do this while you're living. A revocable trust. Now, this man, because he was donating his property and not having to pay the taxes, it was not revocable. He couldn't say, yeah, I've changed my mind, I'm going to keep it or give it to my children. Nope. They would, by necessity, put it in an irrevocable trust where it could not be changed. So you can set up the funds where a trust can, in essence, live after you do. And you see this once in a while. Gifts, you can give children money, but if you give more than a certain amount, it's not so much a gift anymore. So that can be checked. Charitable organizations, yeah, you can give away all you want. And there are a number of organizations, like up here, you have Farmland Trust, you have Great Land Trust, you have these organizations that want to keep some property for recreational, or anyway, just to keep them from being turned into a gravel pit or a subdivision, and they will hold your land in trust. You could remain on it for the extent of your life, but upon your death, it's got a conservation easement attached, which means that property, it's been recorded as such, and that property can never be developed. So there's a number of properties like that. Living will, yeah, this gets kind of beyond personal finance. Those sorts of decisions are up to you. But again, I'm not going to speak on things that are kind of outside the purview of the course. One thing I will talk about here, though, is a power of attorney. They'll just say, yeah, a legal document granting a person power to make specific decisions to you. Okay, when they say specific decisions, they say a power of attorney. Those are kind of in conflict. What they would want to say is a limited power of attorney. So this actually came up in one of the papers somebody had submitted, and I used to do limited powers of attorney all the time, being in the military. I'd be going out of town, whatever, and somebody would be watching my children or something like that, and you would, even for a dog or a car or something like that, let's say you're in a military situation or any situation, you're leaving town and you haven't sold your car, and it's going to be a real hassle at DMV, because if you just leave the car to your friend to sell, how's he going to do the transfer? Well, if he has a limited power of attorney, he's going to not have a problem at all. But there's a specific form from that you get from the DMV that has the certain blocks set up, but it's a limited power of attorney. If you give somebody a general power of attorney, you give them complete authority to act on your behalf on anything. So you want them to sell your car and they end up selling your house, you got nothing to say from a legal standpoint, because you gave that person the authority through a general power of attorney. So in very few cases would you ever give anybody a general power of attorney. If you need to do a power of attorney for some reason, you do a limited power of attorney, generally involving a lawyer or somebody else to make sure you don't get in anything, do anything wrong here. But it could be quite common to do a power of attorney to give somebody to act on your behalf from a legal sense for a specific item. And so it makes a lot of situations in life easier to deal with. But my point would just be avoid general powers of attorney and make sure it's a limited power of attorney, which regards specific decisions rather than all decisions. Durable power of attorney for healthcare, again, kind of beyond the scope of this course. The documents, yep, there aren't really enough safe deposit boxes for everybody. I don't know how many there are in Anchorage or in the state of Alaska, but I guarantee you there's not 500,000. So most people, resort to a safe or something like that. Obviously, fireproof is nice, and or maybe in different locations. If you have your children or your beneficiary or your spouse, maybe I'm assuming your spouse is living with you, but maybe not. Anyway, you might not want all those documents in one place. So if you have a will, don't hide it away somewhere. Make sure that location is known, and maybe have copies with the beneficiaries. There's other documents that could be in there. Some of these things, maybe it's just access to the passwords and all that other stuff. credit card debt information. Yeah, maybe. There's certain things that are super important. Life insurance policies, that's nice to know that they're out there. The insurance company, they're only going to catch up with you when the payments aren't being made, and then that might be the point where they figure out, oh, this person's dead. Retirement account, home ownership, that's all recorded and not such a big deal. It's nice to know that they exist, but those things are going to be at the recorder's office. Anyway, but the will is certainly something where people need to know where it is. Personal tax returns, that's available. Account information, the bank's going to have that. Investment information. It's more the account numbers, the existence of the accounts, and then you as the person, if there is a will, you can get the authority, or the lawyer can get the authority to take control of all those accounts. But you have to know the existence to have that happen. All right, so that's that. I assume there's no more additional homework this week. We're getting closer towards the end of the term. Hopefully you got at least a draft of your term paper going. Jump in on that. The Index Fund podcast. Look a little bit more at that. And we'll talk again next week.